The air was thick with tension as Nexus Prime drifted silently in the void, a gleaming beacon of diplomacy in a galaxy teetering on the edge of war. The massive orbital station was a marvel of human engineering. Gleaming silver towers, suspended gardens, and endless windows gazing out into the endless black. Inside, the hum of controlled chaos pulsed through the corridors, an undercurrent of fear that no one dared voice aloud. Ilara Vance stood at the observation window, her fingers resting lightly on the cold glass, staring out at the endless expanse of space. She could almost feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her. The future of humanity rested in her hands. The conference room behind her buzzed with voices. Delegates from all corners of the galaxy, each one a power unto themselves. Earth's voice, fresh and brash, was about to make its mark, and Ilara had been chosen to speak it. Her sleek black diplomatic uniform barely rustled as she turned toward the table, her eyes catching the faces of the ambassadors. The Exalvarn Empire, towering and proud, had sent their top emissary, a high-ranking official who was as much a threat as a negotiator. The humans, untested but fierce, were here to demand peace. But the whispers of war had already begun. Ilara, a familiar voice called, breaking through the fog of her thoughts. She turned sharply. Captain Dane Rourke stood in the doorway, his uniform disheveled from the long journey. His presence was like a force of nature, impossible to ignore. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room with military precision. The decades of experience that made him the perfect soldier were still etched into his posture even now. She felt a flicker of warmth, quickly smothered. They had once been partners, not just in their work, but in their lives. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, the only bond that remained was the duty that weighed them both down. "What is it, Captain?" Ilara asked, her voice steady, but carrying an undercurrent of concern. She knew what he was here for. The Exalvarn sent a message. "They've moved troops to the border systems," he said, his voice low, tinged with something dangerous. "It won't be long before they come for us." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She'd hoped the talks would buy them time. But this was a challenge of a different kind. The Exalvarn didn't make idle threats. A show of force was inevitable. The first shots would be fired soon. "Is that why you're here?" she asked, walking toward him. She felt a pull to ask more, but the weight of their history kept her words clipped. "To remind me of what I'm about to lose." Dane met her gaze for a moment, his jaw tightening. His eyes softened ever so slightly, a flicker of something unspoken. Then he turned, his back to her. "We don't have time for that, Ilara. The galaxy's already moving against us." She nodded, swallowing the words that almost escaped. The last thing she wanted was to go into these talks with the ghosts of the past weighing her down. But the war? It wasn't just between the Exalvarn and humanity anymore. Forces were gathering. Old wounds were being reopened, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Ilara's voice dropped to a whisper, though no one was listening. "We need to stop it before it starts." Dane looked over his shoulder, his lips curving into something that was almost a smile, but not quite. "I don't know if we can, but damn it, we'll try." Then, without another word, he was gone, leaving Ilara alone with the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. The station outside continued to spin. The stars outside flickered, indifferent to the battles about to be fought. And deep inside, Ilara held her breath, knowing that the next move could decide everything. The tension on Nexus Prime was palpable. Inside the Grand Conference Hall, the air was thick with carefully veiled hostility. At one end of the long oval table, a group of Zalvarn delegates sat in regal silence, their figures imposing and alien, their every movement calculated. The Exalvarn were a proud empire, their sleek, dark exoskeletons giving them an aura of menace. Their leader, Emperor Kralver, remained seated, his posture rigid, his eyes glowing faintly as he studied the humans across from him. The Exalvarn were not known for diplomacy. Their words were often veiled in power, their silence heavier than most threats. Ilara Vance stood at the head of the table, her calm gaze sweeping over the gathering, but she couldn't ignore the beating of her heart. It pounded in her chest, steady and insistent, as she took her place beside the Terran ambassador. The fate of Earth, the fragile peace they'd fought for, and the blood of billions hung on this moment. Ambassador Vance. Kralver's voice rang out, deep and resonant, cutting through the room like a blade. It is an honor. Though we both know your presence here is more than just a formality. The galaxy's borders are expanding, and your people are at the edge, like eager children playing in a grown-up's world. Ilara didn't flinch. She'd heard worse from lesser mouths. We're not here to play, Emperor. We're here to talk. Her words hung in the air, as sharp as the cold steel of a gun. There was no room for misinterpretation, no space for weakness. The Exal Varn were already testing her, testing humanity. She could feel it in the slight shift of their gaze, the way they observed her, waiting for her to make a mistake. She was too new, too untested, they believed, too unpolished. But she wasn't going to let them think that. Before Kralver could respond, the heavy doors of the conference hall slammed open, cutting through the tension like a clap of thunder. Ilara's heart skipped as the towering figure of Captain Dane Rourke strode into the room, his boots echoing against the floor. His eyes, cold and sharp, scanned the room for threats. The very air seemed to vibrate with the weight of his presence, as if even the Exal Varn knew better than to challenge him directly. Ilara, he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. There was no greeting, no apology for his sudden appearance, just the unspoken understanding that something had gone wrong. The Exal Varn did not flinch, but there was a subtle shift in the room. Kralvar's eyes narrowed, though his expression remained unchanged. You've arrived just in time, Captain Rourke, Ilara said, her voice steady, though her mind raced. She could see it in his eyes, the news he brought. Something had shifted. She didn't need him to say it. She could already feel the storm coming. Dane moved closer, his boots almost too loud against the polished floor. The Exal Varn aren't just talking anymore, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. They've mobilized their fleets. War is no longer a matter of if. It's a matter of when. A low murmur swept through the room. The Exal Varn remained unmoving, but the sense of impending violence was suffocating. Ilara's mind raced, but she kept her face neutral. If they attacked now, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. Not yet. Not with their small, fragile fleet, not without alliances forged in blood. What do you propose, Captain? Kralver asked, his tone icy, but not without a hint of amusement. I propose, Dane said, that we stop talking about war and start preventing it. Ilara's eyes flicked to him, but there was no doubt in her mind. They were past diplomacy now. The guns were already in motion. Negotiations are over, she whispered, her voice not meant for anyone but Dane. But he heard it all the same, his gaze meeting hers for a brief, intense moment. Neither of them was ready to accept failure. Not yet. The comms crackled to life just as the stars outside Nexus Prime's observation window seemed to blink with unnatural intensity. The peace that had clung to the station for the last few days had finally shattered, scattered into the void, lost in the cold abyss. Ilara's heart skipped a beat as she stepped into the dimly lit command center. Dane Rourke was already there, his hands poised over the controls, eyes scanning the feeds. His usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a sharpness she had not seen in years. The weight of the situation was too heavy to hide. Talk to me, Captain, Ilara said, her voice steady but edged with urgency. She knew something had happened, something bad. Dane didn't turn around. 2 ships, Terran flags. They were ambushed by Exal Varn mercenaries just outside the neutral zone, he said, his voice calm but laced with a barely contained tension. No survivors. The message was clear. Ilara frowned, leaning over his shoulder to get a better look at the holo display in front of him. The images flickered briefly before settling into place. Two massive Terran freighters, their hulls shredded by precise, brutal attacks. The Exalvarn hadn't just destroyed ships. They'd sent a message, the kind of message that no one could ignore. "We need to call for reinforcements," Ilara said, her fingers itching to take control, to do something, anything. "Our fleet." "Their fleet is already on the move," Dane interrupted, his voice clipped. "They're already in the outer rim. They're not waiting for a formal declaration of war. It's happening now." He stood, pushing the chair back with a sharp screech. His eyes locked with hers, filled with the kind of intensity that always made Ilara's breath catch in her throat. "Where's the president?" she asked, her voice tight. Dane's lips pressed into a thin line. "Evacuating. We've already lost the outer colonies. It's only a matter of time before they come for Earth itself." Ilara's gaze shifted to the window again, watching as the stars outside seemed to stretch into infinity. A peaceful silence hung in the air, one that felt completely disconnected from the chaos building just beyond the station's walls. It almost felt like the calm before a storm, the kind of storm that would shake the very core of everything they knew. But there was no time for hesitation now. The war had already begun. "Activate the defense grid," Ilara ordered, her voice gaining strength as she stepped forward. "Call in every ship, every fighter. We hold the line here. We don't let them breach Nexus Prime." Dane moved swiftly, his fingers flying over the controls. A new wave of urgency pulsed through the room as the defense network kicked into action, and the hum of engines powering up echoed across the station. Ilara could feel it in her bones, the weight of the decision she had just made. If they didn't fight now, they might never get another chance. The first wave of Zalvarn ships entered the outer perimeter of Nexus Prime, their sleek forms gliding through space with the precision of predators. The alarms began to sound low and ominous as Terran ships scrambled to position themselves. It was chaos, a beautiful, terrifying mess of human ingenuity against overwhelming odds. "Ilara," Dane's voice broke through the buzz of activity. "This isn't just about saving the station. It's about holding the line. If we lose Nexus Prime, the whole damn sector falls." Her eyes locked onto his, both of them understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. They were no longer diplomats, no longer negotiators. In this moment, they were soldiers, fighting for something far bigger than themselves. "I know," she whispered. "Let's make sure they know what it means to face humanity." With a final glance at the stars beyond, Ilara took a deep breath, her resolve hardening like steel. The battle for survival had begun, and humanity would not go down quietly. The hum of Nexus Prime's engines was drowned out by the sound of rushing footsteps as Ilara Vance raced through the corridors. Her mind was focused, sharp as a blade. She didn't need to glance at the holoscreens displaying the chaos in the skies outside. The reports coming in were enough. The war was no longer a possibility. It had arrived. And this time, there was no stopping it. "Captain Rourke," Ilara's voice rang through the comms, her words clipped and urgent. "I need you at the central command hub. We've intercepted a transmission that could change everything." Dane's reply crackled back over the line. "On my way." The hallways of Nexus Prime, usually a place of diplomatic calm, now felt like a battlefield. Officers ran past her, their faces pale but determined, and the once bustling hub of politicians and diplomats had turned into a war room. Everyone was bracing for the worst, but Ilara wasn't one to sit idly by. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. As she entered the command center, Dane was already there, hunched over a series of flickering data streams. His face was tense, his jaw clenched, as his fingers flew over the console. The sight of him always had that effect on her, both comfort and dread. He was a soldier, through and through, and in moments like these, it was hard to tell if he was the savior or the storm. Ilara didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've got something you need to see." Dane looked up, meeting her gaze with a seriousness that sent a chill down her spine. "What did you find?" Ilara's eyes flicked to the screen beside him, where a scrambled transmission blinked on and off like a faint pulse. It wasn't just noise. The Exalvarn had been hiding something, and now they were about to be exposed. I traced a signal, Ilara began, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. It's from an isolated communications relay on the outskirts of the border systems. The transmission wasn't meant to be intercepted, but someone missed a backdoor route. I can't make out everything, but I think it's from within the Xalvarn ranks. It looks like a code, something hidden inside their chatter. Dane raised an eyebrow, his attention fully on the data now. What kind of code? Ilara ran a hand through her hair, frustration mixing with clarity. It's a set of coordinates, and it's not just for a base. It's for something bigger, a hidden fleet. They've been building something on the edge of Xalvarn space, something we don't know about. Dane cursed under his breath, pushing himself to his feet. That's not just a threat. It's an invasion plan. Ilara nodded, her eyes narrowing. Exactly. If we don't act fast, we'll be fighting a war on two fronts, one from the Xalvarn Empire and one from this new faction. The weight of what they were up against sank in. The Xalvarn weren't just trying to wipe humanity off the map. They were orchestrating a larger play, pulling strings from the shadows. If Ilara had learned anything, it was that the most dangerous enemies were the ones who didn't just fight with their weapons. They fought with deception. We need to infiltrate that fleet, Ilara said, her voice low but fierce. Get inside, find out what they're hiding, and shut it down before it's too late. Dane's gaze softened, just for a moment. You're not asking for much, are you? Ilara smiled tightly, her resolve firm. If we're going to survive this, we don't have a choice. Dane turned toward the door, his movements smooth and controlled, but his eyes gleamed with a new intensity. Then we'll do it, together. He wasn't just agreeing to a mission. He was agreeing to risk everything for a chance at stopping this war before it became an unstoppable storm. As the door slid open, the two of them walked into the chaos of Nexus Prime once again. But this time, they weren't just trying to survive. They were going to fight back, and they were going to bring the fight straight to the heart of the enemy. With every step, the weight of what they were about to do settled deeper. There was no going back now. The galaxy's silence would be shattered, and humanity would not go down quietly. The air on the ship was thick with the tension of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. The U.S. Vanguard was a sleek, human-made marvel, designed for speed and precision. But tonight, it felt like a hollow shell, a vessel caught in the heart of an unstoppable storm. Ilara stood at the helm, her hand steady on the controls, though inside, her thoughts were a whirlwind. Behind her, Dane Work paced back and forth, his presence a constant reminder of the danger ahead. Coordinates locked in, Ilara said, her voice betraying none of the uncertainty she felt. They were headed into uncharted territory, right into the heart of the Xalvarn's hidden fleet. She could only imagine the firepower that awaited them. The Xalvarn weren't known for half measures, and if this fleet was anything like the one they'd seen in their outer borders, they were walking into a trap. Dane stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto the view screen in front of them. The stars stretched into infinity, distant and cold, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "You're sure this is the right move?" he asked, his voice low, careful. "We don't have a backup plan, Ilara. If this goes south, it will go south." Ilara cut him off, her tone sharp. "But it doesn't matter. We can't wait for the Xalvarn to strike first. We have to hit them before they can deploy whatever they've been hiding. This is our only shot." Dane nodded slowly, the gravity of their situation settling over them both. "You're right. I'm just not sure I like being the bait." Ilara didn't turn to look at him. She knew what he was getting at. They were about to slip past enemy lines, hoping that the shadows would cover their tracks long enough for them to infiltrate the Xalvarn fleet undetected. The Vanguard was a stealth ship, designed for covert missions, but even it wouldn't be enough if they didn't time their move perfectly. "If the Talvarn get wind of us," she said, "it won't just be us they'll be hunting. They'll be hunting the entire Terran fleet. Our only chance is to stay out of sight, infiltrate, and find out what they're planning." "I know," Dane replied, his voice steady again, though the tension in the air between them was thick. There was no turning back now. They were already past the point of no return. "ETA to the fleet?" Ilara asked, her fingers flying across the console. 2 minutes, came the response from the tactical officer. "Prepare for entry." Ilara took a deep breath. Every part of her screamed that they were walking into a death trap, but there was no time to second-guess. The countdown had begun. The shadows of the unknown stretched around them like a suffocating blanket, and all she could do was keep moving forward. The ship's engines hummed as the Vanguard shifted into silent mode, the noise of the outside world fading into an eerie quiet. They were now in enemy territory, a place where every micro-movement could mean the difference between life and death. The view screen flickered momentarily as they passed through a thick nebula, its gas clouds swirling in hypnotic patterns. It was beautiful, in a way, soothing, almost. But Ilara didn't have the luxury of losing herself in the sight. "They won't know we're here until it's too late," Ilara said, speaking more to herself than anyone else. "I hope you're right," Dane replied, stepping closer, his presence a silent strength behind her. The minutes stretched on, each one a small eternity. The vast emptiness of space loomed around them, and the silence between Ilara and Dane grew heavy. Neither of them had ever been this close to the edge, this close to walking into the heart of the enemy's plan. It was an unspoken understanding between them now. They were in this together, but there was no guarantee they would make it out. And then, just as Ilara thought they might make it through unnoticed, the alarm blared, slicing through the stillness like a knife. "We've been detected," the tactical officer called out. Ilara's heart raced. It had been a split second, a flash of recognition on a scanner, but it was enough. The Vanguard wasn't alone anymore. "Brace for impact," Ilara shouted, slamming her hands onto the control panel. "We've got incoming." The ship shook violently as the first blast hit, rattling the walls and sending a spray of sparks from the nearby consoles. Outside the view screen, the Talvarn ships emerged from the nebula, sleek, dark, and deadly. The battle for survival had just begun. The Vanguard shuddered again as another blast rocked its frame, sending a violent ripple through the hull. Ilara's hands tightened on the controls, her mind racing. The tactical display in front of her was filled with red dots, Talvarn ships emerging from the nebula, their sleek forms swarming like predatory beasts. The enemy fleet had detected them, and there was nowhere to hide now. Shields holding at 50%. The tactical officer shouted, his voice strained but steady. "We can't keep taking hits like this." "Ilara." Dane's voice came through the comms, urgent. "We need to break their lock. Now." She didn't need him to tell her that. She could already feel the heat of the lasers slicing through the space around them, each blast threatening to tear the Vanguard apart. The ship was small, maneuverable, but outnumbered. They had only one chance, speed, and a hell of a lot of luck. "Get us out of here, Ilara," Dane said again, his voice biting through the chaos. "Take the evasive route." Without hesitation, Ilara slammed her foot down on the accelerator, sending the Vanguard into a sharp, evasive dive. The ship banked hard to the left, its engines roaring to life as it veered into the vast expanse of the nebula. She could feel the tension in the air, the sweat on her brow as she fought to keep control. They were flying blind, relying on instinct and hope more than any clear visual guidance. "Watch out." Dane's voice cut through the moment, warning her just before a pulse of energy blasted past them, narrowly missing the ship's port side. Sparks flew from the panel beside her as the blast sent the Vanguard into another uncontrolled spin. Ilara gritted her teeth, fighting the ship's violent momentum. The starlight outside the nebula was a blurry haze, everything becoming a rush of colors and flashes. She yanked the control lever, bringing the ship back on course, narrowly avoiding another wave of enemy fire. Status report. Ilara barked, eyes glued to the flickering systems. "We're losing the shields," the officer called, panic creeping into his voice. "Hull integrity at 30%. They're closing in." Dane didn't wait for a response. He was already moving, heading for the back of the cockpit where the weapons officer was stationed. Ilara could hear his voice through the comms, low and commanding. "Get the pulse cannons ready. If we're going down, we're taking some of them with us." Ilara shot him a look, but she didn't have time to argue. The air around them was growing thicker with every passing moment. The Vanguard had always been a fast ship, but now, in this storm of laser fire and enemy pursuit, it felt fragile, a fly trapped in the jaws of a predator. She pushed the throttle again, sending them careening further into the depths of the nebula. They were too close to the Salvarn fleet to outrun them. She knew they needed a way to fight back. They needed an opening, a moment where the enemy's focus wavered. And that moment came, just as the Vanguard ducked behind a swirling mass of charged gas, obscuring the ship from direct fire. The Salvarn ships hesitated, their sensors scanning for the right angle, but the Vanguard was hidden now, cloaked in the nebula's dense cloud. "Now, Dane," Ilara shouted, her pulse hammering in her chest. Dane was already at the weapons console, his eyes sharp as he tracked the nearest Salvarn ship. The hum of the pulse cannons filled the air as they powered up. "Firing," he called, his fingers slamming down on the launch button. A brilliant burst of energy shot from the Vanguard's cannons, blasting through the nebulous haze and striking one of the Salvarn ships directly. The explosion rippled outward, sending shockwaves through the void. The ship exploded in a burst of fiery debris, the shock of the blast rattling the Vanguard's frame. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining Salvarn ships were regrouping, coming in for another pass. "They're coming in fast," the tactical officer shouted. "Brace for another wave." Ilara's mind was a blur of strategy, quick calculations, and instinct. They had gotten one shot in, but it wasn't enough. She needed to push them further, make them doubt their advantage. If they could survive this next wave, they might just make it out alive. But that was a big if. With a grim determination, Ilara prepared herself for the next move, eyes darting to the stars outside. The Vanguard had just struck the first blow, but the war had only begun. The Vanguard's hull groaned under the strain of another blast, sending a jolt of pain through Ilara's body. She gritted her teeth and fought the instinct to jerk the controls back, steadying her hands as the ship spun in an unpredictable arc through the nebula. The Salvarn ships were closing in, relentless, like wolves circling their prey. "Ilara." Dane's voice rang out through the comms, tight with urgency. "We can't keep dodging forever. We need a plan." "I know," she replied, her voice cold with resolve. "We've got one shot left. We're not getting out of this by running." The pulse cannons had just fired their last charge, and the Vanguard systems were already running on fumes. The ship's internal alarms screamed, warning her that the shields were gone, that the hull was weakening. They were running on borrowed time. "Shields are down," the tactical officer reported. "We're exposed. If we don't do something now." "Prepare the main engines," Ilara interrupted, cutting him off. "We're going straight through them." The bridge fell silent, the officers all exchanging quick, uncertain glances. Ilara could feel the weight of their hesitation, but she couldn't afford doubt. Not now. She had made her decision. "We'll push the Vanguard past their lines," Ilara said, her voice steady, commanding. "Once we're inside their fleet, we'll trigger the cloaking sequence. If we time it right, we can slip through and reach their command ship. We get in, get the intel, and we get out. But we need to act now." Dane, who had been standing nearby, staring at the tactical readouts, gave her a sharp nod. "It's a suicide mission, Ilara, but if there's even a chance it'll work." "It has to work," Ilara said, her eyes narrowing with a fierce determination. This is the only chance we have to stop them from annihilating everything. She set her jaw, eyes locked on the enemy fleet closing in. There were more than 20 Xalvarn ships now, massive, their dark shapes looming ominously through the mist of the nebula. They were fast, efficient, and ruthless, and their sensors were designed to track any movement, no matter how small. But the Vanguard had a secret, a hidden feature, developed and designed for this exact moment. It wasn't much, but it was all they had left. Engaging cloaking system, Ilara called out, her fingers flying across the console. The ship's hum shifted, and the entire bridge seemed to hold its breath. The stars outside the view screen shimmered, then disappeared, replaced by the blur of gas clouds and darkness. It was a risk. The cloaking system wouldn't hold forever, and their position was anything but secure. But it was their only hope. "We're invisible," the tactical officer said, his voice low with awe. "For now." "Full thrust," Ilara ordered, slamming her palm against the accelerator. The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring to life, pushing the ship into a breakneck speed as it sliced through the heart of the Xalvarn fleet. The ship rocked with each evasive maneuver, but Ilara held steady, her eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of the Xalvarn command vessel. They were getting closer. The cloaking system was holding. But for how long? The Vanguard was a small, fast target, but it was also fragile. Every minute they were undetected was a minute closer to their goal. Every second was a gamble. "We're almost there," Ilara muttered, her heart pounding. "Prepare the hacking module. Get ready to breach their systems." Dane moved quickly to the back of the bridge, his focus unwavering. "You don't have to tell me twice." The tension was suffocating. Ilara's knuckles turned white as she gripped the controls, guiding the Vanguard ever closer to the heart of the enemy's command structure. The Xalvarn fleet was unaware of the small, cloaked vessel slipping past them, the calm before the storm. Then the comms buzzed with a sudden, chilling voice, a voice they all recognized. "This is Commander Falkor of the Xalvarn Empire. You're not as invisible as you think, human." A ripple of dread shot through Ilara's chest. They'd been spotted. The chase was on. "Brace yourselves," Ilara shouted, slamming the controls into overdrive. The final gambit was upon them, and there was no turning back. The comms crackled with the chilling voice of Commander Falkor, cutting through the tense silence like a blade. "You can't escape, human. This ends now." Ilara's stomach tightened as the weight of his words settled over her. They had been discovered. The element of surprise was gone, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. Not now. Not when they were so close to the Xalvarn's core. "Get ready," she barked, her eyes locked on the flickering display of the Xalvarn command ship, growing ever closer. The Vanguard's engines roared, the ship's sleek body pushing through the nebula with every ounce of power it had left. The cloaking system was holding, for now, but it wouldn't last much longer. Deploying countermeasures, the tactical officer called out. "We're setting up a field pulse to disrupt their lock on us. Hopefully, it buys us a few more seconds." Ilara nodded, fingers flying across the console to adjust their approach. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Outside the view screen, the massive Xalvarn ships loomed, their sleek forms now clearly visible, their deadly weapons tracking the Vanguard with terrifying precision. "They're firing," someone shouted. Just as the first wave of enemy fire erupted toward them, Ilara jerked the control stick, sending the Vanguard into a sharp roll. The ship tilted violently, narrowly avoiding the blast, but the impact of the near miss rattled the crew. Sparks flew across the bridge, and alarms blared in protest. "We've lost auxiliary power," the engineer shouted. "Hull integrity at 20%. We can't take many more hits." Ilara's mind raced, calculating their chances. They were running on fumes, but they had no choice now. There was no time to retreat, no time to regroup. The Vanguard's final objective was in sight, too close to turn back. "Dane," Ilara shouted. "Are we ready to breach?" Dane's voice came back over the comms, calm yet determined. "Ready. We've got one shot at this." He was at the back of the bridge now, kneeling over a portable device. The hacking module was set to breach the Exalvarn command ship systems, and once they were inside, they would have only minutes to gather the data they needed before the entire fleet descended on them. "Hold tight," Ilara muttered under her breath. She pulled the lever back to full throttle, throwing the ship forward like a spear aimed straight for the heart of the enemy fleet. The Vanguard surged, its cloaking field flickering violently as it pushed against the overwhelming force of the enemy ships closing in. Outside, the nebula was a blur of shifting colors, but it couldn't mask the magnitude of the Exalvarn fleet now looming around them. Their ships were closing in, faster than Ilara had hoped. She knew their window was shrinking by the second. And then, just as the Exalvarn fire started to come in too fast to avoid, the hacking module on Dane's console beeped. "We're in," he said, his voice low but filled with triumph. "I've got access to their command systems. We've got what we need." The relief was short-lived. Ilara felt the impact as another blast hit the Vanguard, this time to the starboard side. The ship's systems flickered and died, lights dimming to a near blackout. "We're losing power," the tactical officer yelled. "Shields are gone." "Don't stop," Ilara roared. "We've got what we came for." She had no idea how long they had before the Exalvarn descended on them in full force, but it didn't matter now. They had the information. Now it was up to the rest of the Terran fleet to act. The Exalvarn ships were closing in, their guns charging up for the final blow. Ilara knew their time was up. But then, as if by sheer will, the Vanguard's engines sputtered back to life, jolting them forward in a desperate burst of speed. It was the last of their power, barely enough to break through the Exalvarn lines. "Go, go, go," Dane yelled from the back, urgency in his voice. Ilara gritted her teeth, gripping the controls as if her life depended on it. And it did. With a final, explosive push, the Vanguard broke through the enemy fleet, slicing through the line and heading straight for the open blackness of space beyond. Behind them, the Exalvarn were scrambling. Their command ship, now alerted to the breach, unleashed a series of deadly strikes. But the Vanguard was already out of reach, the nebula now hiding them from view. Breathing hard, Ilara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "We're alive," Dane said, voice hoarse but relieved. "We're really alive." Ilara's eyes stayed fixed on the blackness ahead of them, the rush of adrenaline slowly ebbing away. They had made it out. But the war was far from over. "Not yet," she whispered. "But we've got a chance."